Very good morning and a very good afternoon and a very good evening to our invited audience. This is Sedley Adams. I am an administrator at Systemic Diversity and Inclusion. Very warm welcome to our Martin Luther King celebration today, Monday, 18 January 2021. The program that we have for you today, we'll start with our head of People and HR, Ms. Patricia Page, who will be introducing the program. A very warm welcome to all of you. Ms. Page will be followed by our Director of Education, Mr. David Rowell, who will be taking you through the mission statement of the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group. President of the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group, Dr. Joseph Nwaye, will be joining us momentarily. So in just a couple of moments, I'll be handing over to Ms. Page, who will be welcoming you all to this event. As you can see from the screen sharing that we're offering you, with the order of events, Ms. Page will be leading us in a prayer, and then she'll be offering you a welcome and introducing Mr. David Rowell, Director of Education for the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group. So at this point in time, I'd like to hand you over to Ms. Patricia Page for a prayer and a welcome, and a very warm welcome to you all. Yes. Ms. Page, when you are ready.
Good morning, and good evening to some, afternoon as well. Can you please, when you're logging in, please type your name with the city you're from. I can hear some interference. So we will start out with a prayer. So Father God, today we remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for his fight for freedom, equality, justice, nonviolence, and peace. Father God, he dreamed of a world where we could all have a seat at the table and we would all have our voices heard despite one's race, gender, or religion. More importantly, Father God, we repent of our sins by word, thought, or deed. We pray these things in the name of our blessed Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen. So I will continue with the welcome. You need to cut your machine off because I can hear that feedback. Welcome to our first annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. Today we're gathered to celebrate the life and accomplishments of Dr. King. As we celebrate this national holiday, we are called by Dr. King's legacy to continue working together to realize our nation's commitment of freedom and human rights in the 21st century. As Dr. King said, the time is always right to do what is right. And I personally believe the time is now, and we must always do what is right. Now, I will have our Director of Education, David Rowell, to discuss the mission of SDIG.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, what an honor to kind of share this stage today with the incredible Dr. Martin Luther King. If you allow me a few liberties to make some analysis to introduce our work here at SDIG, Let me start by introducing myself. I'm David Roll. I'm the Director of Education, as Mr. Adams noted. I've been with SDIG for about 2.5 years now, almost from its inception of this idea, and it really has been a journey. And that's one of the things the good doctor, Dr. Martin Luther King, talks about, is how things are a journey. This will go on. We're on this journey, and this journey will go on long past us in the interest of our mission, which is the same as Dr. Martin Luther King's mission, which is equity and social justice. So we here at SDIG have that mission, and we fulfill that mission primarily through understanding that it's dialogue that causes action and change to take place. Again, something Dr. Martin Luther King adhered to very strongly. It's about bringing light to those injustices in the world, giving them voice so that people take notice and cause change. And that's what we here at DIG are all about also. We host these panel discussions, we host interviews, videos, etc., to bring to light those social injustices so that action can be taken to alleviate those injustices. And we do that primarily through dialogue, but a number of other activities as well. And finally, the other analogy I'll make is Dr. Martin Luther King had a great interest in youth ministries. While we're not in ministries, we do also have a great interest in youth, understanding that it's youth that are best positioned to make a change over that long journey I just talked about. Certainly, adults may be in the positions of power right now, but it's youth that are going to be handed that mantle and be handed that power over time. And as we progress, it'll be youth carrying that torch. And so it's a big initiative of SDG trying to find ways to bring youth into to give them voice and to help them fulfill the changes that not only we call for, but great heroes like Dr. Martin Luther King has called for, and many others along the same line. So with that, having introduced myself and SDIG, I just want to welcome you myself to this program, and it sure is an honor and a treat for everyone here today. And with that, I will turn it over to our founder and leader, Dr. Joseph Malala.
Thank you so much, David. A special thank you to all of you for showing, in spite of this difficult time we're in. Martin Luther King Jr. Is a man whose life and accomplishments we're celebrating today. You remember his dream. He says, I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. A statement that aligns with what the founding fathers stated. We hold this truth to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I must have to add something here. I will change the all men to all human beings, or all people are created equal, and they are endowed by the same things that they had been articulated there. Today, we're not going to be walking into history, but I just want to say that it's nice to point out that in recent time, Senator from New York, Patrick Monahan, wrote his report, which says that America was heading to two societies. Two societies that one is black and the other is white, unequal in almost every aspect of life. Today, we can't say with straight face that it isn't still the case. The incident on January 6th is evidence. I've read many reports indicating that if you were black people that did what those people did at the Capitol Hill, that there will be a lot of killings, perhaps a lot of bags, dead bodies. And if we really think through it, it's not inconsistent with reality. a time where we hear of people being killed for things that shouldn't be killed for that. They shouldn't be killed for that. We hear kids as early as in first grade being considered as people to be punished or disciplined more, suspended more than others. All these things reflect that we are not that what President Reagan would say, the hill, that the house in the hill that is full of beauties is not for everyone yet. So today is a day of service, a day of remembrance. And what I would like to say is that I know many of you here who are pushing on the frontier in various areas to push towards those missions for a better world, a world of peace, equity, and social justice for all, a world where we'll all feel the comfort that we belong. And that's the world we're going to continue to pursue. My part is that I have to let them show a small video, very short clip of the man, the great man we're honoring today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Dean Napier, Mr. Bell, members of the faculty and members of the student body of this great institution of learning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there are several things that one could talk about before such a large, concerned, and enlightened audience. There are so many problems facing our nation and our world that one could just take off anywhere. But today I would like to talk mainly about the race problem, since I'll have to rush right out and go to New York to talk about Vietnam tomorrow, and I've been talking about it a great deal this week and weeks before that. But I'd like to use as a subject from which to speak this afternoon the other America. And I use this subject because there are literally two Americas. One America is beautiful for situation. And in a sense, this America is overflowing with the milk of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirits. In this America, millions of people experience every day the opportunity of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all of their dimensions. And in this America, millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But tragically and unfortunately, there is another America. This other America has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the buoyancy of hope into the fatigue of despair. In this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily in search for jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions, and they find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. In a sense, the greatest tragedy of this other America is what it does to little children. Little children in this other America are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority forming every day in their little mental skies. And as we look at this other America, we see it as an arena of blasted hopes and shattered dreams. Many people of various backgrounds live in this other America. Some are Mexican Americans, some are Puerto Ricans, some are Indians, some happen to be from other groups. Millions of them are Appalachian whites. Probably the largest group in this other America in proportion to its size in the population is the American Negro. The American Negro finds himself living in a triple ghetto, a ghetto of race, a ghetto of poverty, a ghetto is to deal with this problem, of the two Americas. We are seeking to make America one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now let me say that the struggle for civil rights, or the struggle to make these two Americas one America, is much more difficult today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. For about a decade or maybe 12 years, we struggled all across the South in glorious struggles to get rid of legal, overt segregation and all of the humiliation that surrounded that system of segregation. In a sense, this was a struggle for decency. We could not go to a lunch counter in so many instances and get a hamburger or a cup of coffee. We could not make use of public accommodations. Public transportation was segregated, and often we had to sit in the back, and within transportation within cities, we often had to stand over empty seats because sections were reserved for whites only. We did not have the right to vote in so many areas of the South. And the struggle was to deal with these problems. Now, certainly they were difficult problems. They were humiliating conditions. And by the thousands, we protested these conditions. We made it clear that it was ultimately more honorable to accept jail cell experiences than to accept segregation and humiliation. By the thousands, students and adults decided to sit in at segregated lunch counters to protest conditions there. And when they were sitting at those lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for the best in the American dream, and seeking to take the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Many things were gained as a result of these years of struggle. In 1964, The Civil Rights Bill came into being after the Birmingham movement, which did a great deal to subpoena the conscience of a large segment of the nation to appear before the judgment seat of morality on the whole question of civil rights. After the Selma movement in 1965, we were able to get a voting rights bill. Now, all of these things represented strides, but we must see that the struggle today is much more difficult. It's more difficult today because we are struggling now for genuine equality. And it's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income and a good, solid job. It's much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee the right to live in sanitary, decent housing conditions. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine, quality, integrated education a reality. And so today we are struggling for something which says we demand genuine equality. It's not merely a struggle against extremist behavior toward Negroes. And I'm convinced that many of the very people who supported us in the struggle in the South are not willing to go all the way now. I came to see this in a very difficult and painful way in Chicago over the last year where I've lived and worked. Some of the people who came quickly to march with us in Selma and Birmingham were active around Chicago. And I came to see that so many people who supported morally and even financially what we were doing in Birmingham and Selma were really outraged against the extremist behavior of Bull Connor and Jim Clark toward Negroes rather than believing in genuine equality for Negroes. And I think this is what we've got to see now, and this is what makes the struggle much more difficult. And so as a result of all of this, we see many problems existing today that are growing more difficult. It's something that is often overlooked, but Negroes generally live in worse slums today than 20 or 25 years ago. In the North, schools are more segregated today than they were in 1954 when the Supreme Court's decision on desegregation was rendered. Economically, the Negro is worse off today than he was 15 and 20 years ago. And so the unemployment rate among whites at one time was about the same as the unemployment rate among Negroes. But today the unemployment rate among Negroes is twice that of whites. And the average income of the Negro is today 50% less than whites. And as we look at these problems, we see them growing and developing every day. And we see the fact that the Negro economically is facing a depression in his everyday life that is more staggering than the depression of the 30s. The unemployment rate of the nation as a whole is about 4%. Statistics would say from the Labor Department that among Negroes it's about 8.4%. But these are the persons who are in the labor market, who still go to employment agencies to seek jobs, and so they can be calculated. The statistics can be gotten because they are still somehow in the labor market. But there are hundreds of thousands of Negroes who have given up. They've lost hope. They've come to feel that life is a long and desolate corridor for them with no exit sign. And so they no longer go to look for a job. There are those who would estimate that These persons who are called the discouraged persons would be 6 or 7% in the Negro community. And that means that unemployment among Negroes may well be 16%. And among Negro youth in some of our large urban areas, it goes to 30 and 40%. And so you can see what I mean when I say that in the Negro community, that is a major, tragic, and staggering depression that we face in our everyday lives. Now, the other thing that we've got to come to see now that many of us didn't see too well during the last 10 years, and that is that racism is still alive in American society and much more widespread than we realize. And we must see racism for what it is. It is a myth of the superior and the inferior race. It is a false and tragic notion that one particular group, one particular race is responsible for all of the progress, all of the insight, the total flow of history.
Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
We have had Dr. Link in his own voice, and what is left for us is not to wonder what his words were. Some of those words echo so much today. So what we have to do is to keep his legacy alive. In order to do that, which is grounded on service, I would have to ask a couple of questions and to particular people, and then I will shift to the audience to ask questions they may have. As you have seen, we have gone so far, but we still have so far to go. Equity and social justice is still challenging us. So my first question will go to Dr. Flint. Dr. Flint, are you there? You are muted, Dr. Flint.
There's no T.
Okay, Flint, okay. That's fine. You've had Dr. King. You elaborated on your experience in Alabama when you were a young boy. Could you tell us where we go from here?
Well, those are sort of three different questions. I think rather than start the conversation about where we should go from here, in this broader group and in our culture and in our little worlds, I want to open that up to a much broader group. But I do think that his theme is the key, is that we still, some of the basic structural problems we have, some of the systemic problems we have are still with us. And that we have a challenge to address and deal with those systemic challenges to diversity and inclusion and really the peace and justice that go with that. So I think, his question, and he is such a great both orator and example of pushing to the next issue, pushing to the next level. And I think that's kind of where we are as a world and where we are as a group. And I'd love to hear people's notions about, what that next level looks like as we pick up the challenge that Dr. King has put down.
All right, thank you. My next question will go to Richard. Richard, what do you say in reference to what would this large group take from Dr. King's memory?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I would say, Dr. Nwoye, that we should take away from this the reality that Dr. King saw in 1968 is the reality that we're still living today. As I was watching that, I Googled the statistic he spoke of in 1968. They are exactly the same in 2021 in terms of disparity between pay in Black and whites. As of May 2020, with COVID, it was exactly 16%, the number he mentioned in that speech, whatever year that was. We know he died in 68. So whatever year he spoke of was somewhere close to that year. Likewise, he spoke of poverty in terms of housing in 1960s. So pretty much the same statistics exist today. And last, I will point out something he mentioned in that film, was it was easy for us to integrate lunch counters, to talk about Bull Connor and the viciousness of Birmingham. But it was extremely difficult for us to do the big systemic changes. Keeping in mind, ladies and gentlemen, he's saying this in the 1960s. We've had over 50 plus years to figure this out, and we haven't. So I will leave you with this thought. Dr. King said, I have a dream. By now, shouldn't we be saying, I have a reality?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This very question would go to Sergio Carter. Sergio Carter, we want to deal with the issues of our time in the best way possible, in ways that will begin to show result, not like past, as Richard eloquently pointed out. We want to see change, at least in numbers. So based on that, you are an attorney. I would like to know, as we work on all fronts, well, we have to work on all fronts. And if we are going to do that, could you tell us what you are doing in your field? I know very much that you are doing a lot, but I would like the audience to hear what you are doing to foster the change we need.
Sure, thank you. You know, like Flint said, you know, there are so many systemic issues that need to be addressed, right? There are lots of different aspects of that need to be changed. I mean, we look at education, legal, medical, there's bias in all of these systems. So there's a lot that needs to be done. I do just a very small part of that in my work right now. As you mentioned, I'm a licensed attorney in the state of California. So I've done the drafting of policies. I've done helping employers, and I focus on the workplace. I've helped employers draft their employment policies. I've done that piece of it. And where I am right now is really focused in on helping companies creating positive, safe, and respectful workplaces. So that's just one piece of the systemic issues that need to be addressed. The reason why I do the piece that I'm doing is because I believe that people need to be educated about what the discrimination and harassment laws are so that they are empowered to be part of the solution to create civil workplaces. When employees, as an attorney, I represented leaders my whole career. And what I heard from employees is they didn't understand what their rights were. They didn't know what they should do when they found themselves in these situations where they were being harassed or discriminated against. So they were not able to pursue fair outcomes or pursue justice. So that's part of what I do. And I also teach people, you know, there are lots of things that happen at work that are uncivil. You know, from somebody saying something rude, insensitive, to bullying, abusive, all the way up to your illegal discrimination and harassment. And I found in my work that it's too late to wait till it rises to the level of being illegal. Let's teach people what to say, give them the script of how to address these situations when they start off as rude, insensitive comments, all the way to microaggressions. Let's start dealing with these behaviors, because as an attorney, that's what I can speak to, is behavior. We know that we can't change people's minds, right? We might not be able to change their beliefs, their attitudes, their preconceived notions, but we do know that, and there's plenty of science to back this up, that if we can change their behavior, then over time, hopefully they develop better habits and their opinions and behaviors get to change. So again, I'm dealing with a very specific part of the equation. And I just want to leave everybody with one of my favorite quotes by Dr. King. You know, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I just want to remind everybody, you know, it's such a heart. My heart is heavy too, believe me. I'm with all of everybody on this call is here for the same reason. We want to honor Dr. King's legacy to end discrimination and to make this world just and fair. I'm here with all of you. But I think we have to remember one of the other things he was really a proponent for is how do we do this with nonviolent action to stand up to the injustice, right? So we can, each of us can make a difference in your own communities, in your own families, in your career, in your workplaces. We can all take some of these teachings back and start educating people on what they are while we deal with the systemic issues that are, you know, really holding our country back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The next question I have will go to Dr. Karim. Karim, you are educator just as I am. As an educator, it perplexes me to hear the marginalization, the disciplining of certain students just for the pigmentation of their skin, or expelling them for the same reason. And at the same time, they are really ill-equipped to be in school. So when you sort of, you know, discipline and suspend them, they are losing doubly. So I know you've been doing so much work in all the areas, whether it's at the college level, elementary school, or just helping people who are disabled. Could you tell us on that front, what are you doing to foster and ensure that we go towards achieving what Martin Luther King had envisioned? Okay, it seems like Dr. Ingram is should I say?
I'm here.
Did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, I didn't. I thought you were talking to someone named Kareem.
Okay, that's all right. The question was addressed to you as an educator.
Yes.
I made a comment about how perplexed I tend to be when I look at the inequity that we see in schools, from elementary to PhD to all kinds of educational system, because we still have people who are programmed with misconceptions that they believe is true.
Absolutely.
We all know that is not true. So my question is, what are you doing in your profession as an individual? And I underscore the fact that I know you are doing a lot. But I wanted you to tell the audience what you are doing on that front and how you expect to move it forward.
Got it. Thank you so much for the question. I think that's a really important point. You know, in American schools, we don't have civics anymore, and our history lessons are very, I would personally say, whitewashed, if you will. After living in Germany and teaching there, I see a completely different perspective in that they are very open about the Holocaust and what happened in their own country with, you know, the terrible horrors of their history, and they teach it very openly in schools in order to make sure that that never happens again moving forward. Mr. Flynn posed the question that what are we going to do moving forward? Well, I think an important thing that we need to do moving forward is exactly what we're doing right now, and that is discussing these issues and creating an awareness of these issues. Mrs. Takar made a really great point about knowing your rights, being aware of the laws when it comes to discrimination, harassment, being aware of microaggressions, controlling behavior. These are all excellent things that moving forward can change perspectives. We can't just snap our fingers and change everyone's biographies and experience, but we can, you know, regulate behaviors in a way moving forward so that it, you know, our young kids growing up, they have a little bit more of a chance. And I hear a lot nowadays of, well, this doesn't affect me. In school, I hear it every day. I do lessons on Black American soldiers in every war and try to incorporate that into my lessons. Even as an English teacher, crossing the standards within lessons, and my students say, nobody ever told me that. And I say, yeah, it's not taught in school. So, you know, educators that are willing to push the envelope and step outside the box and teach things from a different perspective, not in a controversial way, but in a very educative way on this is America, and this is what we're doing moving forward. And yes, these horrors happened in our country, and we need to be aware of that, but we also need to be aware of how hard our Black citizens have worked ever since the inception of our country, how they've built this country, you know, with the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears through every single war. And really helping young students to have the self-confidence behind that. I think that it can damage human dignity in knowing, oh, my ancestors were slaves. Yes, we have to talk about this. We also need to build their self-confidence in knowing that, you know, there's so many positive effects of history within every single war that Black soldiers have contributed to, and also in so many other ways with inventions. So teaching all aspects of our history, I think, is very important in changing perspectives. And, you know, the opposite of ignorance and stereotypes and discrimination is education and understanding, and these are the conversations that we need to be having. Also, I hear a lot in schools, K-12, high school, and also in college, even when I'm teaching, that people say, well, that's the past, leave the past in the past. Well, how do we move forward? How do we make sure that the past doesn't happen again? How do we change the future towards this equity and fairness? And that is by talking about it, forming an understanding about what happened, and realize affect us. The civil rights movement wasn't that long ago. The Holocaust wasn't that long ago. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929. This year he would be turning 92. Anne Frank would also be turning 92. They both should be turning 92, you know, if they hadn't been killed. So I think that focusing on these issues, this is generationally within our lifetimes, within either our lifetimes or our grandparents' lifetimes, that these major issues have been happening, especially Ruby Bridges. She's only 66. You know, that's my mom's age. That's my peers' age, my colleagues' age. So these things are happening within our lifetimes, and they do make a difference with us and our children and life moving forward. So to answer the question, how do we move forward and change minds and change perspectives and change hearts? And that is, I believe, exactly what we're doing, discussing, engaging, creating understanding, creating awareness, not sweeping it under the rug, not pretending it didn't happen, not pretending that a Black man wasn't suffocated to death by a police officer on the road last year. Not ignoring what's happening, speaking about what's happening, and creating more opportunities for inclusion and discussion in the future.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's something we have to keep in mind, because those who forget their history, they may tend to experience the ugly part of the history. So it's really important that we reflect on history, while at the same time looking at our present situation and forging how the future will be. So this is, in essence, part of what we are doing here. So the history of the past, the present, and perhaps the future should all be put in context, and we should be striving for making things better. And this call is to Athena. Athena is coming to us from Switzerland. Athena, are you there? Can you hear me? I think she's
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Oh, good, good. I know that you've been working in various international organizations, including Red Cross and among others. Martin Luther King Jr. is a world figure. He has done so much that you can see his work being reflected in every corner of the earth. Based on that, could you tell our audience what your thoughts are? And in the capacity of what you've been doing for the entire world, in what ways are you pushing his dream?
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Hi, everybody, and glad to be here. I think one of the things that I see from his work, as well as reflecting to the work that I do, I work very much in, as you mentioned, in the humanitarian sector. I work with a number of like ICRC, International Committee of Red Cross, or International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, and a number of humanitarian organizations. And one of the things that it has been becoming more and more, we are speaking about it, the UN organization, they are more taking further action with the concept of the decolonization humanitarian aid, which means that actually when we look at reflecting the humanitarian aid, for example, the way that it has happened in the last 50, 60 or more years, as well as when we look at the workforce, is not reflecting really the reality. For example, it's very much white European going to different countries and trying to help, and what we need to reflect, and that's really is making sure that everyone has equal access to the workforce, as well as everyone is being heard. The concept that is missing and as needs to be more reflected, as Dr. King has indicated, in terms of the engagement, in terms of the dialogue. And that's the dialogue and the engagement needs to be really nurtured in the humanitarian sector, as well as many other sectors. But I'm just taking this as an example that in terms of having that dialogue and engagement from the global south to the global north, there needs to be really collaboration with both states, and in order to go forward, in order to really practicing inclusion at every level of the organizations, within the organization, or also reflecting on the work that they do in the humanitarian sector with outside, with the affected population, with the beneficiary. So when we talk about inclusion and diversity, we really need to take both into the consideration that, as Dr. King says, it's about engagement, it's about the dialogue, it's about making sure that no matter if it is affected population or within the organization, they all have level of engagements, and we have equal opportunity and equity at all levels.
Thank you. This next question is going to Dr. Adekunle. Dr. Adekunle is part of SDIG. In fact, she is the director of international affairs on SID side, and she's coming to us from Gambia. Dr. Adekunle, could you tell us the type of work you are doing, the awesome work I know you are doing? I think I see one of your students here. If you could, tell us a little bit of what you do and what you intend to do more in furthering that internationally. Dr. Adekunle, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Did you get my question?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, good.
Yes, I had your question.
All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I want to welcome all of us to this program. Yes, I'm talking from the Gambia, West Africa, in Africa. Um, I'm a university lecturer, a senior lecturer in the University of the Gambia, and in the School of Journalism and Digital Media. So starting from what I do as a university professor, I try to synthesize, we are into development communication. We synthesize young people in order to kind of have a kind of a ripple effect. We open their eyes to development issues so that as journalists, we want them to put on their development lenses, and so that when they report issues, as we as well been discussing all along, they should be sensitive to the plight of every segment of the society. They should be pro-poor and pro the disadvantage in the society. So from that level, I start my development communication with my students, so that I try to make all of them to also become communicators, in the area of development, to open the eyes of people around them. For a long time, I've been working with rural communities, with grassroots women, with young people, to address development problem that these people are facing. I've done that in my country, Nigeria, in Ghana, and in the Gambia. Okay, when you go to these the grassroots population, you see there are a lot of development problems that they are facing, even starting from the issues of health. With young people, we address the issue of their reproductive health, because you see a lot of them, they drop out of school due to problems of reproduction. Some lose their lives when you talk of teenage pregnancy, talk of abortion. And usually part of the inequality that we have in our schools is that when there is a case of a teenage pregnancy, you see a lot of African nations will not allow that young girl to ever go back to school. The girl is expelled, even though the male partner goes ahead with the education, but you see the young girl is expelled from school, and that may spell poverty, for a whole lifetime, because education is what gets people out of poverty here. And once you are not educated, a lot of people that are in the formal sector are actually poor economically, because maybe they are not active players in the economy of their nations. So we address all these issues with young people, issues of reproductive health, issues of equipping them with life skills. Then with the women, at times we empower them. We empower them financially. How do we do that? At times we link them to facilities where they can have microfinance. At times we also train them. We train them in different areas. Even in the issue of reproductive health too, we train women, because many of these women, they don't know anything about reproductive health. You see them, they continue to have children because they don't know that there is any way they can ever stop having children. And in spite of the poverty, they keep on increasing their family size. So these are the kind of things that we see. So we also link the women in the rural areas, that is what we refer to as countryside. We link them with markets. If people go there to meet them, they buy their things so cheap that the farmer seems to be farming at a loss. But women farmers are linked with markets where they can get better prices for their goods. At times, there was a project that we did to make sure that these women in the countryside, they could use IT facilities to market their goods, link them to the internet to market their goods. So we just go into all these things. I mean, Professor Gottin is also here. We also had this project of giving them IT skills, because there are so many of these women who cannot even use a phone. They cannot use a phone. So you can imagine, they don't know how to use the search machine. They can't use the Google to get information. So when you do these little things about training them, getting them empowered, in IT, you are really doing a lot. So now again, coming to what you are doing here with young people, the young people are being trained to be advocates. They are advocates in their community, advocates on different issues. Like when the COVID issue came, a lot of people are ignorant about it. Some people think that it's a disease of the West. You know, it has nothing. So these are, we have Mahmoud here who went to town, you know, trying to enlighten people on all those things. We just say that you are supposed to be like a watchdog for your society as a journalist, because I'm in the school of journalism. As a journalist, it's not just to report issues, but to interpret, to let the people see how these issues can actually affect their lives. You know, at times some development projects have adverse effects. Like when you want to develop a particular location and there is deforestation, the people don't have access to farmland. You know, it's in one way it appears as if the government is trying to help them, but at the same, on the other hand, you see that the deforestation spells, it spells a lot of problem for them, because these people, you know, they may lose their farmland, you know, and the general ecosystem is affected, which also affects their livelihood. So these are the things that we try to do. And I'm also into research. You know, we research into problems that are affecting both youth and women. For instance, in an area of sexual harassment, domestic violence, here we have complex problems, especially in the Gambia here. The first problem that I encountered was of a student of mine, a teenage student, you know, in the university, who was withdrawn, and she was the best person in her set. I was teaching her, and I just saw her for a whole week sobbing in class, trying to ask what is the problem. She would tell me there was no problem. I told her classmate, can you please help me talk to her to find out what is wrong with her? She did not tell anybody what was wrong with her. Then she disappeared. She wasn't coming to school. Then we had to send a delegation to go to our family. What is happening? She was forced into marriage. That's forcing girls into marriage is something that happens here a lot. So they said that they permitted her to finish in high school. I mean, the first part of the high school, we have junior school here, that they allowed her to finish. At that time, they went to ask her hand in marriage. She said she still wanted to continue. Then she continued up to grade 12, which is the final year of high school. And they said they asked her hand in marriage. She was still saying she was not ready. Then she went on to the university, so they could not tolerate that any longer. And this girl was married off to somebody who could not spell his name. You know, so you can see, I mean, it's not that there is anything about somebody not being able to spell one's name, but there's something about you not being able to communicate with your partner. I mean, you should be able to operate at the same level. And this is a person who did not even share the same, you know, worldview with this person. So we have a lot of that happening. We have girls who are maybe about 20 years or so, this forced into female genital cutting before they get married. Usually this happens maybe a week before they get married. I mean, you can see a week before a girl is going to consummate, marriage to be consummated, she's circumcised. And you can see that it's really very inhuman. These are all the issues that we are facing here, because this society is a society that, you know, is a patriarchal society, and I mean, very, very patriarchal, and women are facing a lot of issues here. And we do research into all this area, all these things. What we do with the research, we try to disseminate our results, you know, to see whether these things can come into the notice of policymakers, and they can help to make changes. At times, legislation doesn't help. We already have legislation here against FGC, female genital cutting or mutilation, whichever one you choose, but people still go on practicing these things. And here in the Gambia, we have youth parliaments. Young people, they come together, you know, to discuss national issues, and they make representation in parliaments. The larger, I mean, to the government. So they discuss any issue that is going on, you know, as if they are actually in a real parliament. And at the end of the day, they make representations. So there's a lot of work here, really. You know, there's a lot of work, because the people who are knowledgeable, they are being sensitized also to try as much as possible to mobilize others, so that we can get this society moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We can all see that this is global. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream is something we will all have to push globally. It's not just here. And we have to learn things from one another. If you listen to Dr. Adekunle, you hear what they're doing from kids' perspective. They're using all kinds of means to move the needle forward. And that brings me to the next person whom I would like to, David. David Hoffman, could you please be very briefly tell us what you are doing, because all these are things I intend for us to infuse and use it to reach the global community, regardless of where the place may be. And for Dr. Adekunle, there's a program, rather there's a publication I'm going to be sending you information on. You can send all those things or what you guys are writing about so that you can be disseminated to much larger community. So David, picking up on what Dr. Adekunle said, could you give us very briefly the idea as to what you are doing to bring the voices of youngsters to the fore?
Yeah, there's two projects we're currently working on. One is forming global learning communities where we're establishing relationships between classrooms, obviously on a global scale. And the point is to give students more voice and more advocacy over their learning, as was mentioned with that idea of a whitewashed curriculum, especially here in the US. Addressing that, one of the quotations I find myself sharing as an educator in the classroom as well is that concept that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. And I was shocked when the one year I asked my question, it was about to a class, it was made up of about 85% of the students were Black. And when I asked the question of whether or not racism and discrimination was still an issue in today's world, good 85% of those students actually stated that it wasn't, that they didn't see it as relevant. And that's part of that whitewashed curriculum. That's part of not having really a pulse on what's going on around them. And they just see their world. And if they're not directly seeing it or directly seeing the impact of it, they have no idea it's even there. It's been erased. So bringing that attention to it. And then with the global learning communities, we hope to do that with a lot of what's been mentioned, you know, addressing the accessibility of the media literacy, having students be able to find voice and share the challenges that they see as important, find their own resources, create mentorships, and be able to give students a platform in which to share these solutions. Part of that is actually going out into the community, forming relationships with whether it's local businesses, organizations, leaders, regional, national, global, and they have to create these allies in their solutions. They go through an elevator pitch, build it, they create a sustainable action plan and actually start implementing that. So it is one of those projects that is taken into action, not just done as a student project and left on the table. It has something as growth and continues. So. Thank you so much.
Talk about children, students' involvement in all these activities. This next question goes to Mahmoud. Mahmoud is also coming from University of Gambia, where he has worked with many people, including universities in Canada and in some parts of the United States. Mahmoud, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Could you please very briefly tell this audience what you are doing and the organizations you're associated with? And of course, it couldn't be possible without Dr. Adekunle. Go.
Thank you very much. And since it's Martin Luther King's Day, I have to say one of the quotes that I feel is one of the most important that he has made. He said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" And I think this is one very significant quote, because back in the days, we used to sit and say, what can our country do for us as youths? But those days are gone. And for my generation, it's about what can we do to bring change in Africa? What can I do to bring change in my region? What can I do to bring change in the Gambia? And in that regards, I believe advocacy has been the most important thing that I've strived on. And since then, I have worked with the UNDP in regards to gender equality in the Gambia, worked with university professors like Dr. Adikule to sensitize people, to help people to unlearn those myths that they have learned about gender equality, that all sexes are equal, all sexes have the same right to education, that household chores are not gender-based. They are just basics, common things in life that both sexes should learn. So these are some of the things that we have been trying to help youths understand, to help youths to understand that they should not wait for their leaders to do something for them, but they should stand up and do something that can bring change within their communities. And in that plight, we have been working together with youths from the National Youth Parliament in the Gambia to help make policies in regards to access to information, which is very, very significant in the research that we do. The Gambia, we do not have access to information laws, and as journalism students, it is very, very, very significant that we have these laws made. So we have been working with the Gambia Press Union to help bring out policies together with the Gambia government to ensure that students and researchers have access to the information that they want to do their research on. Also, talking about gender, we are also working with rural Gambia to help enlighten people about the detriments of female genital mutilation, how it can have a ripple effect on young girls, how it can cause so much trauma, and how it can affect their marriages. And in that regard, we discuss and go around communities and sensitize people about the significance of donating blood, because we have seen the rise, a huge spike in maternal mortality. Women are giving birth, they're passing away because they do not have access to blood. They do not have people to donate them blood. So these are a few things that we do, but mainly my work is all about advocacy and making youths understand that they can make it in Africa, they can make it in the Gambia, they should involve in politics, because politics, like I always say, politics is a game that you should play, a game that you should understand, a game that you should master, and a game that you understand that is based on policies and not on tribal lines. And these are some of the things that I think at the moment, since the Gambia is on an election year, it's very significant that we enlighten youths about the need to participate in these elections as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can see that we can learn from everyone that the issue of justice is not restrained to those who are in political power. If those in political power are not doing what they need to do, we should be doing what we need to do to make sure that it's moving forward. I'm being prompted that time is running against us, because I have two more people I have to mention. Perhaps they could give us an idea, because they're doing so much in this arena and they are partnering with us in many ways. Now, I have to call Dr. Remo Lord. Could you please tell us the type of things you are doing? I know you are doing a lot of things in community-based education. Some of the adults we see in localities are in the position they are because of inadequate preparation, which they should have gotten much when they were early. But discriminatory practices may have contributed to their station. So, Dr. Lord, could you please comment very briefly?
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Hello, everyone. Dr. Ingram and I and a couple others have this group called Community-Based Research for Engagement in Education. Among the things we're doing is looking at the actual issues that the marginalized, the vulnerable populations bring up on their own, not what a textbook cookie cutter public policy people tell us what they are. I've heard a lot of you mention about access, the right to access and opportunity for education, but I think the question now becomes is, to what extent, who develops that curriculum? What is education? And this is something that CBRE is investigating. Dr. Ingram and I are researching this, and we're presenting at a conference, the American Association for Adult and Continuing Education in October, is what is this thing of technocracy, technocratic ideologies that runs throughout both pre-K through 12 and adult education? What is meritocracy, as who gets to dictate what these children and adults returning to education get to learn. I've been a part of a lot of what they call, it's now called Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, which used to be called Workforce Investment Act. And what they do is they pump millions, and I've been studying Pennsylvania as a case example, but they pump millions into adult education for training. But for what? It's to help, and they even say it's right in the literature, is to help you make a living, contribute to the company, no matter who the company is. We have University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, we have U.S. Steel Corporation, and many others. Here, Google's coming to town. And everything is centered on these people learning this specific language. When a company, a rootless transnational corporation, can just up and move at a heartbeat, like we've seen here in Pittsburgh many times. We've never recovered from the steel collapse of the 70s and 80s. Now, what we continue to do is engage people in culturally and linguistically diverse learners. Who are the teachers of these? If we continue to do the technocratic approach, we lose a lot of our learners. And in fact, they leave school, high school, or some point earlier, middle school. What we want to do is, they say, increase population, retention, this and that, but who is actually lifting a finger as far as officials go to address that? We blame their family life, we blame them, but no one, well, we blame the teacher. The teacher's to blame. They're horrible. No, they're not. They are deeply immersed in this reality that society has dictated unto the teacher. So Seabury is saying, okay, wait a minute. There has to be another way to look at this. So through research, interviewing teachers in culturally and linguistically diverse learner classrooms, whether it's pre-K, 8th grade, 12th grade, or post-secondary education, how is it that we get our message across to these people? We explore the primary contradictions located within any activity system and find a resolution. So, Dr. Noyer, I thank you for the opportunity, and folks, we invite you to collaborate with Seabury. We can't do it alone. It's way too big and it's way too entrenched system. And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist, I'm just being real. So how can we help?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're gonna go to Bouncy. Is that the Bouncy? Just a second. Where is T? Okay, we have Miss Bunton. Could you please comment on what you are doing that reflects the service Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preached? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah. Could you comment on what you are doing, Beth?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Oh, the question is, we are celebrating this great man who pushed us to do service work to others, who talked about equality and social justice for all. My question is, in what ways are you moving that needle forward? In other words, in what ways are you contributing to meet Dr. Martin Luther King's vision?
Right. So I feel like Dr. Martin Luther King focused significantly on social justice, even though it was more racial equity. But I do believe that justice anywhere is injustice injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And so in my work, I do a lot of health equity and health access work, especially for refugee populations, immigrant populations in the United States, forced immigrants, and volunteers. I feel like health access for these populations are not necessarily, there's limited access to healthcare, regardless of what kind of healthcare. Healthcare in the US is already quite hard to, attain. So coming from a country where, you probably didn't have access to these services and coming to a country where you have some barriers like insurance barriers, language barriers, limited awareness and education, it's important to increase access for this population. So a lot of my work is with marginalized populations and helping them to attain access to healthcare. But thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work.
Thank you so much. This question is gonna be going to Lydia Prado. Lydia, can you hear me? Lydia Prado, can you hear me? Okay. If we can't hear from Lydia, then let's shift to Lois. Lydia, by the way, is, should I say, she speaks up to 6 languages. She's doing immense work in South America, in Africa, in Asia. She's like...
I don't speak 6 languages. I don't speak Madinka fully.
Yeah, she's like, this is like one of those that are really her work. Now, we're gonna go to Lois. Lois, can you hear me? Okay, she's on mute. Well,
I can hear you. I'm here.
Okay. Lois has a child, and her child was told around first grade that she couldn't do anything, that the fact that she should take them home. The good news for the child was that her mother had a deep pocket. So the mother was able to take him to 3 continents, or at least 3 countries, and got him educated. And in final analysis, the son, whom they say could not learn, ended up getting his PhD from Oxford University. So I would like Lois to tell us, what has she been doing to move the needle forward, especially for those who do not have deep pocket or parents who have deep pocket?
Hello, Joseph. What am I doing? My drive for education is to teach those who are marginalized. And my push is that if we want to teach more children, we have to include them in the literature that we're working with. We think about literacy as teaching decoding, and there's this drive to teach decoding. But if we want to engage marginalized children, they must see themselves in literature. And it's a critical component that is always ignored. My son only learned to read because we were extremely privileged and we had a lot of circumstances working towards us. Never, never, never should a child learn to read under those circumstances.
Thank you so much. You can see that I'm being pushed back and forth, that time is running out. So you all have to bear with me. But I have to also remind you that we have a partner that is actually doing some work every Friday between 4:30 and 5:30. We have them, it's like a talk show, and they deal with these critical issues of our time. And it's part of our effort to sort of address these things in multiple ways. In fact, in as many ways as we can possibly do it. We have kids youth wing coming up, where they're gonna be exposing all these anomalies that are going on in various communities. And this is a global organization. We are reaching everywhere. So I urge you to stay with us, and in any way you can support us in terms of giving us information so that we can be able to work on it. We're gonna be having publications. We're gonna be having, we're gonna be having people doing all kinds of activities, podcasts, writing up, doing all these things, so that we can engage the global community in our effort to at least get people educated. Because without education, I'm not sure we can go anywhere. So with that, I have to say to you that we're gonna be closing here, and I want to thank my colleagues whom, if we are not them, this wouldn't have been possible. our able person who pushes me around, sadly, Sadly Adams is our tech person, and he has been instrumental to organizing this. Patricia Page has been tremendous. And of course, I can, I cannot mention everybody. I just cannot remember everybody. So bear with me if I didn't mention your name. But the key is that we're going to be moving forward. We're going to be moving forward. We cannot be restrained by any challenge. All the challenges, we will face them. If Martin Luther King Jr. was able to do all these things when Hoover, former FBI director, was after him, when the communities were after him, of course, KKK, we are predominant in daylight. Now they can hide, but today we have the privilege to be more forceful because issues of equity and social justice for all must be realized. So on that note, I thank each and every one of you from my bottom of my heart, and you take care from wherever you are and stay safe. Thank you very much.
I'm going to say a closing prayer.
Okay, please do. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I want to remind everybody that the Martin Luther King theme this year is Rising Together, Facing the Challenges of Tomorrow Today. So, Heavenly Father, as we come to the end of our annual Dr. Martin Luther King celebration, we ask that our discussion here today give us strength to accomplish everything that we set out to do. Thank you for hearing and answering our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much. Well done, Patricia. All right. Thank you so much. You all stay safe, and we're going to continue to work together. And with all of us, nobody can change it. We have to change the world to be what we want. All right? Bye.
Right. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.